The desert highway stretched endlessly before Marcus Stone's Kenworth, its silver chrome gleaming under the New Mexico sun. 25 years of trucking had taught him to read the road like a book. But his other training, 15 years as a Navy SEAL team leader, had taught him to read danger. And the 3 black Escalades that had been shadowing him for the last hour were spelling trouble in capital letters. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The CB radio crackled with static before a voice cut through, thick with a Mexican accent. "Pull over, driver. We have a business proposition for you." Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror, catching another glimpse of the convoy behind him. Their formation was too precise, their spacing too perfect. These weren't ordinary criminals, they were military trained. At 58, with steel grey hair and laugh lines around his eyes, most people saw Marcus as just another aging trucker. That assumption had saved his life more times than he could count. The little town of Socorro was still 20 miles ahead, its truck stops and diners a regular part of his Albuquerque to El Paso route. For the past 5 years, he'd run this stretch, without incident, building a reputation as a reliable, independent operator. But things have been changing lately. Other drivers whispered about protection rackets, hijackings, and worse. The Escobar cartel was moving in, trying to control every aspect of cross-border commerce. "Last warning, old man," the voice on the CB growled. "Pull over, or we do this the hard way." Marcus reached under his seat, fingers brushing against the concealed compartment where his Sig Sauer P226 rested. The same model he'd carried through 3 tours in Afghanistan, legal, registered, and hopefully unnecessary. The lead Escalade accelerated, trying to pull alongside his cab. In his mirror, Marcus saw the passenger window rolling down. Caught. The distinctive glint of an assault rifle's barrel. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. His mind flashed back to Rosa's diner in Socorro just yesterday morning. The place had been his regular stop for years, but something was off. The usual morning crowd of truckers was absent, replaced by hard-looking men in expensive clothes who watched everyone too closely. Maria, the owner's daughter, had served his coffee with trembling hands. "Be careful, Mr. Stone," she'd whispered. "They're forcing everyone to pay protection money." Papa tried to refuse. She'd glanced at her father behind the counter, his arm in a cast. "They're not just criminals anymore. They say their leader, El Serpiente, was special forces. They're taking over everything." The memory faded as the lead Escalade edged closer. Marcus knew their game plan. Standard cartel tactics. Box in the target, force them to stop, make an example of them. But he hadn't survived 30 years of combined military and trucking experience by being predictable. His load today was routine, medical supplies for the VA hospital in El Paso. Good, legitimate, work that helped people who'd served their country. The kind of work that had given him purpose after leaving the SEALs, after losing his wife Sarah to cancer. He'd promised her he'd find peace, build a quiet life. For 5 years he'd kept that promise, but sometimes peace had to be defended. The lead Escalade was almost level with his cab now. Through the tinted window, Marcus caught a glimpse of the gunman, young, probably ex-military based on his positioning. These cartel soldiers were used to civilians freezing up, giving in. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Marcus checked his mirrors one last time, noting the precise positions of all 3 vehicles. His hands remained steady on the wheel, his breathing calm and measured. Just another aging trucker, they thought. An easy target. The first shots cracked through the morning air, pinging off his trailer, warning shots designed to scare him into compliance. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. In his previous life, he'd trained other SEALs in vehicle interdiction tactics. Now those lessons were about to be put to a different use. The desert stretched out around them, empty and unforgiving. No witnesses, no backup, just a lone trucker against trained killers. But Marcus Stone had spent his life preparing for moments like this, even if he didn't know it at the time. The war for the highways was about to begin, and these cartel soldiers were about to learn a very expensive lesson about judging books by their covers. More shots rang out, closer this time. Marcus reached for the radio one last time. "Boys," he said calmly, "you really should have done your homework." Then he made his move. 2 days earlier, the signs of trouble had been impossible to miss. Marcus had pulled into Pete's truck stop, just outside Socorro, a place that had been his second home for half a decade. The sprawling facility usually bustled with activity, independent truckers swapping stories over coffee, mechanics working on rigs, the constant flow of life on the road. But that morning, something was different. The massive parking lot was half empty, and those trucks that were there belonged to major companies, not independents. The usual morning chatter on the CB was replaced by tense silence. Inside the diner, Marcus had taken his usual spot at the counter, nodding to Maria as she reached for the coffee pot. At 25, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity as her father, though now there was fear behind her smile. "You heard about Tommy?" she asked quietly, glancing nervously at a group of well-dressed men in a corner booth. Marcus's hand paused halfway to his coffee cup. Tommy Rodriguez was one of the good ones, a young independent operator building his business one haul at a time. "What happened? They took everything," Maria whispered. "His truck, his cargo. Said if he wanted to keep driving these routes, he needed to work for them directly. When he refused..." She trailed off, her hands trembling slightly as she poured more coffee. Through the window, Marcus watched a black Escalade cruise slowly through the parking lot, the same model as the ones following him now. They'd been watching, learning patterns, identifying targets. His mind drifted to his SEAL days, particularly one mission in Kandahar. His team had tracked a similar operation. Organized crime taking over local transportation infrastructure, controlling everything that moved through their territory. It wasn't just about profit, it was about power. The diner's door chimed as 3 more men entered. They wore expensive casual clothes, but Marcus recognized their bearing immediately. Mexican special forces, probably from their Grupos Especiales. The way they moved, the way they immediately assessed the room. Old habits. "Die hard. Your mother's huevos rancheros are as good as ever," Marcus told Maria, his voice carrying just enough for others to hear. Just another regular talking about breakfast, but his eyes met hers with a different message. "Be careful, be ready." She nodded almost imperceptibly. Her father had been a Marine before opening the truck stop. They knew how to handle trouble. As Marcus paid his bill, he noticed one of the well-dressed men speaking quietly into a phone. "Stone, independent, regular route to El Paso. Yes, drive alone." Now, as the Escalades behind him moved into attack position, those puzzle pieces clicked into place. They'd been watching him, studying his patterns, probably thought they'd found an easy target, an aging trucker, running a regular route, no backup. What they didn't know was that before Marcus Stone had been a trucker, before he'd even been a SEAL, he'd grown up in these deserts. Every back road, every emergency turnoff, every potential ambush point was mapped in his memory. And his Kenworth wasn't exactly stock anymore, not since he'd called in some favors from his old unit's mechanic. More shots pinged off his trailer, closer now. They were getting impatient. Good. In his experience, impatient attackers made mistakes, and Marcus Stone had spent a lifetime learning how to capitalize on other people's mistakes. His fingers tightened on the wheel as he spotted the perfect spot ahead, a sharp curve with a steep embankment on one side. He'd been playing defense long enough, time to show these cartel soldiers that they weren't the only ones with military training. "Last chance, old man," the voice on the CB barked. "Pull over now." Marcus keyed his radio one final time. "Boys," he said calmly, "you really picked the wrong trucker to mess with." Then he stomped on the accelerator, and the real fight began. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus's Kenworth roared as it ate up the empty highway, its engine pushing well beyond normal operating limits. The modifications he'd made, reinforced bumpers, bulletproof glass, protected fuel lines, were about to prove their worth. The lead Escalade accelerated harder, its gunman leaning further out the window. These weren't street thugs. Their shooting, stance, and trigger discipline screamed professional training. The rounds hitting his truck weren't random. They were systematically targeting vital points, trying to disable rather than destroy. Through his side mirror, Marcus watched the second Escalade move into position on his right, while the third maintained distance behind. Classic tactical box, one vehicle to disable, one to extract, one to maintain overwatch. They'd done this before, but so had he. The curve ahead was notorious among local truckers, a steep angle with a guardrail on one side and a sharp drop on the other. At these speeds, physics said a rig this size needed to slow down. Marcus accelerated. Instead, the lead Escalade's driver noticed too late. As Marcus's truck began to lean into the curve, the Cartel vehicle tried to maintain position alongside. Perfect. With a sharp turn of the wheel, Marcus sent 40 tons of truck and trailer swinging wide. The Escalade's driver had two choices: get crushed against the guardrail or swerve into the oncoming lane. He chose the lane and met the concrete barrier head-on. The explosion lit up Marcus's mirrors as the first Escalade became a fireball. The second vehicle swerved hard to avoid the wreckage, its driver fighting for control. Amateur move. Marcus had learned vehicle interdiction from the best, and rule one was, never overcorrect at speed. The Escalade flipped, rolling several times before coming to rest in the desert scrub. Two down. The third vehicle fell back, its driver finally showing some sense, but Marcus wasn't about to let them regroup. These Cartel soldiers had brought war to his roads. Time to show them what real warfare looked like. His CB crackled again, a new voice this time, older, calmer, carrying the unmistakable authority of command. "Impressive driving, Mr. Stone," the voice said in perfect English, "but now you've made this personal. Those were El Serpiente's personal guards you just killed." Marcus keyed his radio. "And who am I talking to?" "Colonel Juan Ramirez, formerly of Mexico's Special Forces, now head of security for the Escobar Cartel's northern operations." A pause. "Though you might know me better by my call sign from Afghanistan." The Viper. Marcus's blood ran cold. He knew that name. In 2009, his SEAL team had tracked a rogue Special Forces operator who'd been training Taliban fighters in advanced combat tactics. They'd never caught him, but the evidence had pointed to a former Mexican military officer who'd gone mercenary. "The famous Marcus Stone," Ramirez continued. "Navy SEAL, Silver Star recipient, now playing truck driver in my territory. Did you think we wouldn't do our research? That we wouldn't recognize your tactics?" More vehicles were appearing on the road ahead, black SUVs and armored trucks blocking both lanes. A roadblock, professionally staged. Behind him, the third Escalade was joined by more reinforcements. "Your reputation precedes you, Commander Stone," Ramirez said, "which is why I'm offering you a choice. Work for us, train our people. We'll make it very worth your while." Marcus checked his fuel gauge, 3/4 full. His modified tank gave him about 400 miles of range. The nearest border patrol station was 60 miles south, but he knew they were compromised. Too many Cartel informants. His satellite. A phone was in the cab's hidden compartment, but anyone worth calling was at least an hour away. Not interested in training criminals. Marcus replied, his mind racing through options. Ramirez laughed. Criminals? We're businessmen, Commander. We're bringing order to chaos. These independent truckers, these small operators, they're inefficient, unprofessional. We're modernizing the industry. By killing anyone who won't submit, by removing obstacles to progress. The future belongs to those strong enough to take it. Ramirez's voice hardened. Last chance, Commander. Join us, or this ends badly. Marcus spotted a gap in the roadblock ahead, small, but just wide enough if he timed it right. More importantly, he recognized the terrain. There was an old ranch. Access road about a mile ahead, practically invisible unless you knew where to look. He'd used it during his wilder teenage years. You know what your problem is, Colonel? Marcus said, his hands steady on the wheel. You military types who go, mercenary, you forget the most important lesson they taught us. And what's that? It's not about being the strongest. Marcus stomped the accelerator, his engine roaring as he charged the roadblock. It's about being the smartest. The cartel soldiers opened fire, bullets pinging off his reinforced windshield. But they'd made a crucial mistake with their roadblock positioning. The morning sun was directly behind Marcus, making it hard for them to aim effectively. At the last possible moment, Marcus jerked his wheel hard right. His truck smashed through the lighter vehicles on that side, sending them spinning. The impact was brutal, but his reinforced bumper held. He was through. The access road appeared exactly where he remembered, a barely visible track leading into the hills. No vehicle larger than a truck should attempt it, and even that was risky. Perfect. Shame you never caught me in Afghanistan, Colonel, Marcus said into the radio as he turned hard onto the dirt road. You might have learned something about tactics. The pursuing vehicles tried to follow, but the steep grade and loose gravel were too much for their street-oriented SUVs. One by one, they spun out or got stuck. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile as he navigated the treacherous road. He'd won this round, but he knew it wasn't over. El Serpiente and Ramirez wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. They'd come at him harder next time, and they'd be better prepared. His satellite phone buzzed, a number he hadn't seen in years. Marcus answered, keeping one eye on the challenging trail ahead. Stone, a familiar voice said. Dave Cooper, his old communications expert from SEAL Team 8. Just got some chatter about your little drive. You stirred up one hell of a hornet's nest. Yeah, ran into an old friend, Colonel Ramirez, a sharp intake of breath. The Viper? He's running cartel ops now? Seems like. Dave, I need intel. What are we dealing with? It's bad, Marcus. The Escobar. Cartel isn't just taking over trucking routes, they're building something bigger. Private army, political connections, legitimate business fronts. Word is, they're trying to establish their own autonomous zone along the border. Marcus absorbed this as he guided his truck down the treacherous trail. Why now? Why here? Location. New Mexico's the perfect corridor. Minimal law enforcement presence, lots of remote areas. But here's the thing, you're on their list. They've been watching you, studying your background. They see you as a threat. Through his CB, Marcus heard cartel vehicles coordinating, trying to cut him off once he reached the main road. They were learning, adapting. Professional soldiers, not common criminals. Keep me posted, Marcus said finally. If you hear anything specific. Watch your six, old friend, Dave replied. These guys, they're not just criminals. They're building an empire. The call ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the endless desert landscape. His load of medical supplies had probably been damaged in the fight, but right now that was the least of his worries. He'd spent 5 years building a peaceful life, trying to keep his promise to Sarah. But men like Ramirez, like El Serpiente, they only understood one language, and Marcus Stone was fluently bilingual. His CB picked up scattered transmissions as cartel forces regrouped, coordinating their response. They were probably tracking his cell signal, analyzing possible escape. Routes, let them come. Sometimes a warrior had to become a trucker to find peace. And sometimes a trucker had to remember he was a warrior to defend it. Marcus Stone drove on through the morning, but his trained mind was already processing the implications of Ramirez's involvement. The colonel wasn't just another cartel enforcer. He was a strategic thinker, someone who planned 10 moves ahead. During his SEAL days, Marcus had studied the Viper's operations extensively. Ramirez had a signature approach: start with transportation infrastructure, then systematically expand control through legitimate businesses. He'd done it in Afghanistan, turning local trucking companies into a network that smuggled weapons and trained fighters across the border. The satellite phone buzzed again. This time it was Maria. "Mr. Stone," she whispered, "they're here at the truck stop. Colonel Ramirez himself. He's making an example." Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. "What kind of example?" "They're gathering all the independent truckers, showing them pictures of your damaged escort vehicles, saying this is what happens when people resist progress." Her voice shook. "But that's not the worst part. They're targeting families now. Tommy's wife, his kids, they've disappeared. And they have lists, Mr. Stone. Names, addresses, routes. They know everything about everyone." The implications were clear. Ramirez wasn't just trying to control the roads. He was breaking the will of an entire community, making them believe. Resistance was futile. "Stay safe," Marcus told her. "Keep your head down. This isn't over." As he navigated the back roads toward his fallback position, Marcus allowed himself to fully analyze his situation. The cartel had resources, manpower, and now a commander who knew his capabilities. But they had weaknesses too. Ramirez's ego would make him predictable. He'd want to prove he could outsmart his old adversary, and his rapid expansion meant his forces were spread thin, relying heavily on fear and intimidation to maintain control. Most importantly, they'd crossed a line by targeting families. That would turn the local community against them, and no criminal empire, no matter how well-funded, could survive without at least some local support. His CB radio crackled with scattered transmissions. Independent truckers were going dark, disappearing from their regular routes, some out of fear, others likely preparing to fight back in their own ways. The highways were about to become a battlefield, and Marcus Stone would make sure the cartel regretted starting this war. He checked his fuel gauge again and did some quick calculations. He had enough range to reach a secret location, an old ranch owned by his late wife's family. Sarah had left it to him, and over the years he'd turned it into something of a fortress, though none of his trucking friends knew about it. Old habits die hard. "Time to wake up some ghosts," he muttered, turning onto an unmarked dirt road. The war for the highways had begun, and Marcus Stone was about to remind everyone why Navy SEALs were the most feared fighting force in the world. Behind him, the desert stretched vast and empty, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Ramirez would be analyzing patterns, predicting his movements. The next encounter would be even more dangerous. Let them come. Sometimes a warrior had to become a trucker to find peace. And sometimes a trucker had to remember he was a warrior to defend it. The ranch appeared ahead, its weathered buildings barely visible against the landscape. Marcus had spent the last 5 years gradually reinforcing this place, though he'd never told anyone why. The main barn had been converted into a garage with a hidden workshop. Underground storage held enough supplies to last months. Security systems that would make most military bases envious. Sarah had understood his need to maintain readiness, even as they built their quiet life. "Some men are born protectors," she'd told him once. "The trick is finding the right things to protect." As he guided his truck into the barn, his tactical mind was already plotting countermoves. Ramirez would have access to satellite imagery, but the barn's roof was electronically shielded. Any surveillance would show just another abandoned ranch. Marcus began unloading his cargo of medical supplies, checking each box for damage. Most were intact. His reinforced trailer had done its job. He'd need to find a way to get them to the VA hospital eventually. He'd made a promise. And promises. It mattered. His satellite phone buzzed again. This time it was Dave. "Got something you need to hear," his old teammate said without preamble. "Intercepted some communications. Ramirez isn't just here for the trucking routes. The cartel's building something bigger. They're calling it Project Borderland." Marcus moved to his command center, hidden behind false walls. Multiple screens showed feeds from carefully hidden cameras, covering miles of surrounding territory. What kind of something? Think of a private military corporation, but with cartel backing. They're recruiting ex-military, buying legitimate businesses, setting up training camps disguised as private security firms. But here's the kicker: they've got political protection, high-level stuff. How high? State Department level. Someone smoothing the way for them to operate as a private security contractor along the border. Once they control all cargo movement in the region, they'll have de facto control of the entire corridor. Marcus watched his security feeds as two cartel vehicles passed on the distant highway. They were establishing a search pattern, methodically working through the area, professional, thorough. "There's more," Dave continued. "Remember that Taliban commander we tracked in 2009, the one working with Ramirez? Omar Kazai. Never caught. Him, he's here, in New Mexico. Satellite picked him up at a private security training facility outside Las Cruces. Whatever Ramirez is planning, it's big enough to get Kazai out of hiding." The implications were staggering. Ramirez, Kazai, political cover, and a private army, all operating under the guise of legitimate business. The cartel was building more than an empire. They were building a sovereign entity. An alert flashed on one of his screens. More cartel vehicles approaching, still distant but moving with purpose. They'd found something, a trail, a signal, something that pointed them in his direction. "Dave," Marcus said, "I'm going to need some help. The old kind." "Already on it. Called in some markers. You've got friends incoming. Independent truckers with special backgrounds, if you know what I mean. Give me 24 hours to get them in position. May not have 24 hours. Marcus watched as more vehicles joined the search pattern. "Ramirez is too smart to give us time to organize. Then we adapt. Remember what the chief used to say?" Marcus smiled grimly. "The enemy gets a vote, but they don't get a veto. Watch. You're 6, brother. Backup's coming." The call ended as Marcus's perimeter sensors picked up more movement. The cartel forces were expanding their search grid, tightening the noose. Soon they'd find the ranch road. His CB crackled one final time. Ramirez's voice, calm and measured. "The board is set, Commander Stone. Let's see if you still remember how to play the game." Marcus moved to the hidden armory, where years of preparation waited behind steel doors. Inside, carefully maintained weapons and equipment stood ready, not the tools of paranoia, but of preparedness. He began checking each piece with practiced efficiency. "Game on, Colonel," he muttered, loading a familiar M4 carbine. "Game on!" The desert night wrapped around Marcus's ranch like a shroud. Through his command center's monitors, he tracked multiple cartel search teams methodically sweeping the area. Their thermal signatures glowed on his screens. Professional search patterns, maintained communications discipline. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were conducting a military-grade manhunt. His satellite phone vibrated. "Stone," he answered. "Quietly. Marcus, it's Tommy Rodriguez." The young trucker's voice was strained. "They took my family, my wife Angela, my kids. I don't know where." "Slow down, son. Start from the beginning. I was making a run to Phoenix when they hit my truck. Professional job, spike strips, coordinated takedown. But they didn't want the cargo. They showed me pictures of my house, my family, said if I didn't cooperate, they'd disappear." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Where are you now?" Safe house in truth or consequences. Some guy named Dave Cooper got me. Out, says he knows you from before. Dave had been busy. Good. What exactly does Ramirez want from you? He's recruiting independents, building some kind of private fleet. But it's not just about trucking. They're setting up training camps, calling them driver certification centers. But Marcus, I saw what they're really teaching. Combat driving, weapons handling, tactical communications. They're building an army. Through his monitors, Marcus watched another cartel search team pass within a mile of the ranch. Their pattern was tightening. Soon they'd find the access road. Listen carefully, Marcus said. Dave Cooper's a former SEAL, communications expert. If he's got you in a safe house, you're properly off the grid. Stay there. Help's coming. What about my family? We'll find them. But first, I need everything you know about these training camps. Tommy's information painted a disturbing picture. The Escobar cartel wasn't just taking over trucking routes. They were transforming independent operators into a paramilitary force. Those who refused disappeared, while their families became leverage to ensure compliance. Another call came in as he ended the conversation with Tommy. This time it was Maria from the truck stop. "They're moving something big," she whispered. "Military trucks disguised as commercial rigs. They're gathering at the old airstrip outside Socorro." "How many?" "At least 20 that I've seen." "But Mr. Stone, one of the drivers, mentioned something about Project Borderland, said it was happening tomorrow night." Marcus crossed to his planning table, where satellite maps covered the surface. The old airstrip had been abandoned for years, but its runway could still handle heavy aircraft. Perfect for large-scale cargo operations. "Maria, I need you to be very careful. These people, I know who they are," she cut in, "and I know who you are. Dad told me about the SEALs he worked with in Iraq. Said they were the only ones who could stop someone like Ramirez." Before Marcus could respond, his perimeter sensors flashed red. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. They'd found the ranch road. "Maria, get somewhere safe. Tomorrow's going to get ugly." He ended the call and moved to the armory. Through the cameras, he counted 6 SUVs and 2 tactical trucks approaching. Around 50 men, based on thermal signatures. Heavy weapons, too, the kind you didn't get on the civilian market. His satellite phone buzzed again. Ramirez. Impressive. "Set up, Commander," the colonel said without preamble. "Thermal shielding on the barn, buried sensors in the access road. You've been planning for war for a long time. Just like to be prepared." "For what?" "The quiet life of a trucker." Ramirez laughed. "Men like us don't retire, Commander. We just find different battlefields. Speaking of which, I have some guests here who'd like to talk to you." A new voice came on the line. Marcus, please." It was Angela Rodriguez, Tommy's wife. In the background, he could hear children crying. "You always were predictable," Ramirez continued. "The moment you heard about the families, you had to play the hero, had to make a stand, just like Afghanistan." Marcus. "Watch the cartel forces deploy around the ranch, setting up textbook positions for a siege. What do you want, Colonel?" "The same thing I wanted in Afghanistan, to build something lasting. Project Borderland isn't just about controlling trucking routes. It's about creating a new order, and you're going to help us." "Not interested." "Then the Rodriguez family will join the others. We have quite a collection now. Wives, children, parents, all belonging to truckers who thought they could resist progress." Marcus's mind raced. The cartel forces had the ranch surrounded, but they weren't attacking. Ramirez was too smart for a frontal assault against a cornered SEAL. This was psychological warfare. "You have 1 hour," Ramirez said. "Surrender. Agree to train our people, and the families go free. Refuse and—" He left the threat hanging. The line went dead. Marcus moved through his command center, analyzing options. The ranch's defenses were solid, but he was badly outnumbered. Direct confrontation would be suicide. His phone buzzed again. "Dave Cooper. Got your backup incoming." His old teammate said. 4 independent rigs approaching from different directions, all driven by former Special Forces operators. They'll be in position in 30 minutes. Not enough time. Ramirez has hostages, truckers' families. He's using them as leverage. Maybe not. Remember that signal intelligence specialist we worked with in Kandahar, Michelle Chen, the NSA analyst? What about her? She's been tracking Ramirez's operation. Just send me some interesting coordinates. Looks like they're holding the families at a compound outside Las Cruces, the same facility where they spotted Kazai. Marcus studied his tactical displays. The cartel forces had stopped advancing, settling into siege positions. Waiting. Dave, I need a favor. A big one. Name it. Contact Special Agent Sarah Torres at the DEA's El Paso office. Tell her Marcus. Stone says Kandahar Protocol is in effect. A long pause. Are you sure about that? Once we trigger that. Ramirez wants a war, Marcus said grimly. Let's give him one he's not expecting. He ended the call and began powering up systems he'd hoped never to use. Hidden panels slid open, revealing military-grade communications equipment. Another compartment held specialized gear, the kind that didn't officially exist. Ramirez thought. He had Marcus cornered, forced to choose between surrender and sacrifice. But the colonel had forgotten the most important lesson from their Afghanistan encounters. Never play a SEAL's game by the SEAL's rules. Marcus Stone began transmitting coded messages on frequencies he hadn't used in years. Calling in markers from people who owed him favors, activating networks that had lain dormant but never died. Outside, the cartel forces waited in the darkness, confident in their superior numbers and position. They had no idea what was coming. The war for the highways was about to escalate far beyond anything Ramirez had planned for. And when the dust settled, the colonel would learn why some legends were better left undisturbed. Marcus moved to his communications array, activating a secure channel he hadn't used since his SEAL days. Broken Arrow, this is Sandman. Authentication. Code Sierra Echo Alpha Lima 99. The Kandahar Protocol is in effect. For several seconds, only static answers. Then a familiar voice crackled through. Sandman, this is Broken Arrow, actually. Authentication accepted. Assets are green across the board. Special Agent Sarah Torres had been their DEA liaison during the Afghanistan operation. She'd helped track Ramirez's operation back then, and more importantly, she'd helped create the Kandahar Protocol, a contingency plan for when criminal organizations grew too powerful for conventional law enforcement. Status report, Marcus said, watching the cartel forces through his monitors. We've been building a case against the Escobar cartel for months, Torres replied, but they've got too many officials in their pocket. Every time we get close, evidence disappears, witnesses recant, judges issue surprise rulings. Project Borderland. Bigger than we thought. They're not just creating a private army, they're establishing a sovereign entity. Once they control all transportation in the region, they'll effectively have a stranglehold on the border, and they've got corporate backing. Major players who see profit in privatized border security. Marcus checked his tactical display. More. Cartel vehicles were arriving, setting up a proper military perimeter. The training camps. Fronts for something much worse. Remember Omar Kazai's specialty in Afghanistan? Chemical weapons. We've detected traces of similar compounds at the Las Cruces facility. They're manufacturing leverage, something to ensure cooperation from local authorities once they make their move. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about controlling trucking routes or building a private army. Ramirez was creating a power base that could hold an entire region hostage. What assets can you give me? Marcus asked. Official. Channels are compromised. But I've got 3 tactical teams off the books, former Delta operators. They can be in position within 2 hours. And your old friend Michelle Chen has been tracking their communications. She's identified the weak points in their network. Marcus studied the satellite imagery on his main screen. The old airstrip outside Socorro was showing increasing activity, heavy cargo aircraft landing under cover of darkness. "Tomorrow night," he said. "That's when they're making their move." Agreed. Multiple indicators point to a major operation. But Marcus, we've got another problem. Remember those missing families? They're not just hostages. Ramirez is using them as test subjects for Kazai's compounds, proving the effectiveness of his leverage. Marcus's blood ran cold. He'd seen the results of Kazai's work in Afghanistan, the thought of children being exposed to those weapons. Two-phase operation, he said, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. First, we free the hostages. Then we hit their main force at the airstrip before they can distribute whatever they're bringing in. "My teams can handle the airstrip," Torres replied. "But the compound in Las Cruces is another matter. Heavy security, unknown number of hostages, and we can't risk Kazai deploying those weapons if he feels cornered." Marcus watched the cartel forces continuing to surround his ranch. Ramirez was patient, professional. He'd wait out the hour, expecting Marcus to surrender rather than risk the hostages. The colonel's biggest mistake was assuming Marcus was alone. "I need a direct line to Michelle Chen," he said. "If she can tap into their communications network, we can coordinate with the independent operators Dave Cooper's assembled. Turn their own tactics against them. Already done. She's standing by on frequency 7. And Marcus, there's something else you should know. We found Sarah's medical records from before she died. The cancer diagnosis, it wasn't natural. Traces of the same compounds Kazai's working with. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. 5 years ago, his wife's aggressive cancer had seemed sudden, inexplicable. Now, Ramirez was testing his weapons even back then, Torres continued, using scattered, seemingly natural deaths to refine the formula. Your wife's doctors worked at a clinic with cartel connections. Marcus's hands tightened on the communications console, everything connected. His wife's death, the cartel's expansion, the missing families, all part of Ramirez's methodical plan to build an empire. "Sarah knew something was wrong," Marcus said quietly. "In the end, she made me promise to build a quiet life. But she also made me promise to keep fighting if the right cause came along." "This cause is right," Torres agreed. "But Ramirez has an army. What do we have?" Marcus began activating the ranch's hidden defenses. Automated systems powered up, weapon caches unlocked, and specialized equipment emerged from concealed compartments. "We have something better than an army," he replied. "We have people worth fighting for." He switched to the frequency Michelle. Chen was monitoring. Time to coordinate with Dave Cooper's team of independent operators. Time to show Ramirez that he wasn't just facing one old SEAL. He was facing a community that had finally found its teeth. Outside, the cartel forces maintained their siege positions, watching the darkened ranch through night vision gear. They were expecting Marcus Stone to emerge, alone and defeated, ready to surrender, to save the hostages. Instead, they were about to witness the resurrection of Commander Stone, the SEAL team leader who'd hunted Ramirez across Afghanistan. And this time, he wasn't just fighting for his country, he was fighting for family. Marcus switched to a secure channel. "Michelle, what's their communication structure look like?" "Three-tier system," the NSA analyst replied. "Local teams on encrypted. Radio, regional commands using satellite phones, and top-level communication through a private server farm. But they made a mistake. Their whole network runs through a single communications hub at the Las Cruces compound." "Can you disable it?" "Better. I can feed them false information, make their own command structure work against them." Marcus pulled up the compound schematics Michelle had sent. The facility was well designed, multiple security layers, overlapping, fields of fire, redundant power systems, but like its commander, it had a fatal flaw: arrogance. "They're so confident in their encryption," Michelle continued. "They're running everything through that hub. security systems, surveillance, even their chemical weapons safeguards. Speaking of which, Marcus switched back to Torres's channel. What's the status of those compounds? Lab analysis just came back. It's worse than we thought. They've weaponized Marcus. It's the same compound that killed Sarah, but enhanced, more targeted. Marcus's mind flashed to those final days with Sarah, her quiet strength, even as the mysterious illness consumed her. She'd known something was wrong beyond the cancer, had tried to investigate the clinic. Then the sudden downturn, just as she'd gotten close to something. How many families are we talking about? At least 15, Torres replied. Mostly women and children. They're being held in the compound's east wing near Kazai's lab. The cartel's using them to test delivery methods, exposure rates. Some of them are already showing symptoms. Marcus checked his watch. 40 minutes until Ramirez's deadline. Outside, the cartel forces had finished setting up their perimeter. Professional work, overlapping fields of fire, counter-sniper, positions, quick reaction teams staged at strategic points. Dave, he switched channels again. What's the status of our independent operators? 8 former special forces, all disguised as regular truckers. They're in position on different approach routes. Got 4 more with combat experience moving. 2 secondary positions, plus a surprise. Remember Carlos from Fallujah? Marcus smiled. Carlos Ghost Martinez had been their top infiltration specialist. He's running Overwatch right now. Says he owes you for Baghdad. The pieces were coming together. With Michelle controlling their communications, Torres's teams hitting the airstrip, and Dave's operators in position. Time to call the colonel, Marcus said. Michelle, are you ready to take control of their network? Say the word. 1 keystroke, and their whole command structure goes blind. Marcus picked up his satellite phone. Time to remind Ramirez why you never corner a seal, the colonel answered on the first ring. 20 minutes, Commander. Have you made your decision? Actually, Marcus replied, I have a counter-offer. You know what your problem is, Colonel. You're so focused on building your empire, you forgot the first rule of warfare. And what's that? Always know what your enemy is capable of. Michelle, now. Across the compound's perimeter, cartel communications suddenly erupted with false alarms. Security systems reported breaches that didn't exist. Surveillance cameras showed phantom intruders. Automated defenses activated randomly. What have you done? Ramirez's voice held the first trace of uncertainty. Remember Michelle Chen, the NSA analyst who almost caught you in Kandahar? Say hello, Colonel. Communications hub compromised. Michelle's voice cut through their channel. Security systems overridden. Chemical weapons fail-safes disabled. The latter was a bluff. Michelle had found the weapons controls, but couldn't access them yet. But Ramirez didn't know that. You're bluffing, the colonel said. You don't have the manpower. Look at your perimeter cameras, Colonel. Count the trucks. 1 by 1, Dave's operators began appearing on access roads. Regular-looking semis, driven by regular-looking truckers. But they were converging on the compound with military precision. Remember Carlos, Marcus continued. He says the weather in Baghdad was better. A shot rang out, and one of Ramirez's counter-sniper teams went silent. Carlos's calling card. Now, Marcus's voice hardened. Here's my offer. Release the families, all of them. Shut down Kazai's operation, or I take your entire network apart piece by piece. You'll never get them all out alive, Ramirez snarled. 1 word from me and Kazai floods the entire containment wing with Sarah. Marcus cut him off. The cancer, that was you, wasn't it? Testing your weapons even back then. A long pause. Collateral damage in a greater cause. Progress requires sacrifice. No, Colonel. Progress requires justice. Marcus nodded to Michelle. Across the compound, alarms began blaring. Emergency containment protocols were activated, sealing Kazai's lab wing, with him inside it. Impossible, Ramirez breathed. Those systems are hardened. Michelle's good at impossible things. Now, About those families? Before Ramirez could respond, new voices erupted across all channels. Torres's teams announcing their presence at multiple points. The independent operators calling out ready positions. Even Maria's voice broadcasting detailed intelligence about cartel movements from the truck stop. "Face it, Colonel," Marcus said quietly. "You're not just fighting one old SEAL. You're fighting an entire community. People who are tired of living in fear. Parents who want their children back. And a lot of very capable operators who owe me favors. Kill them all," Ramirez ordered his men. But the commands didn't transmit. Michelle had complete control now. "You wanted a war," Marcus concluded. "Congratulations, you've got one." He ended the call and began powering up his ranch's final defensive systems. Across the perimeter, Torres's teams were moving into position. Dave's operators were coordinating their approach. Carlos was eliminating key cartel positions one by one, and somewhere in the compound, Angela Rodriguez held her children close, not knowing that salvation was coming, that a promise made to a dying woman 5 years ago was about to be kept. Marcus Stone checked his weapons one last time, not just tools now, instruments of justice, of vengeance, of liberation. The war for the highways had just become something much more personal, and Ramirez was about to learn the true meaning of shock and awe. Breach Team 1 ready, Overwatch in position, Ghost actual, targets marked. The coordinated responses came in quick succession over Marcus's secured channel as he moved through. The ranch's underground tunnel system. Few knew about these passages, remnants from Prohibition days that he'd modernized and expanded. "Michelle, status on their communications?" "Complete chaos," the NSA analyst replied. "Their security systems are showing intrusions at every access point. Ramirez is trying to coordinate a response, but I'm feeding different units conflicting orders. They don't know which commands are real anymore." Marcus reached the tunnel's exit point, a concealed hatch that would put him behind the cartel's perimeter. His modified truck was already in position, Dave Cooper having moved it during the earlier confusion. "Torres, are your teams ready at the airstrip?" "Affirmed. We've identified 6 cargo aircraft on approach. Whatever they're bringing in, it's happening tonight." Marcus checked his tactical display. The cartel forces surrounding his ranch were breaking formation, trying to respond to multiple phantom threats. Carlos's precise shooting had eliminated their best counter-sniper positions, forcing them to fall back to secondary positions. Independent. "Units, sound off." One by one, the former Special Forces operators responded. Each was positioned in a commercial truck, looking like ordinary independents caught in the wrong place. But these rigs had been modified, reinforced rams, hidden weapon compartments, military-grade communications. "Remember," Marcus said, "the primary objective is the hostages. East wing of the compound. Kazai's lab is nearby, so expect chemical weapon protocols to be in effect. Michelle will guide us through the security systems, but be ready for manual override." "What about Ramirez?" Dave asked. "He's mine." Marcus's voice was cold. 5 years ago, he used my wife to test his weapons. Tonight, he answers that. The tactical display showed Ramirez's forces regrouping around the compound. The colonel was adapting, trying to consolidate his defenses, but the chaos in his communications network was taking its toll. Units were responding to phantom threats, leaving gaps in their coverage. "Ghost to all units," Carlos's voice cut in. "High-value target spotted. El Serpiente himself is on site. Repeat, the cartel commander is present." This changed things. El Serpiente rarely left his secure compound. If he was here... "Michelle, what else is happening at that airstrip?" A pause as the analyst accessed more data. "Manifests just decoded. They're not bringing something in, they're moving something out. Multiple chemical weapon shipments set for distribution across the entire region." "Jesus," Torres breathed. They're going to hit every major population center at once, create instant leverage over the entire border region. Marcus's mind raced. The pieces clicked together. The timing, El Serpiente's presence, the rushed operation. They're not waiting to build their autonomous zone. They're taking it by force, tonight. That's not the worst part, Michelle added. I've cracked more of their files. Those families they're holding. They're not just test subjects. They're the first wave of distribution. They're going to send them home, infected, to spread the compound through their communities. Marcus thought of Tommy Rodriguez's children, of all the families who'd been taken, of Sarah used as an unwitting test subject years ago. Change of plans, he said. Dave, take your team and support Torres at the airstrip. Carlos, maintain overwatch and priority targets. Michelle, start their emergency containment protocols. Seal off the lab wing. What about you? Dave asked. I'm going to have a chat with Colonel Ramirez about proper chemical weapon disposal. Marcus's voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded one of the most effective SEAL teams in the service. And then I'm going to show him why you don't use children as weapons. He opened the tunnel hatch, emerging into the desert night. Ahead, the compound's lights illuminated multiple cartel teams scrambling to respond to phantom threats. Their disciplined formation was breaking down as Michelle's false commands sent them chasing shadows. One more thing, Marcus said as he moved toward his truck. Sarah used to say that monsters thrive when good people look away. Tonight, we will stop looking away. The modified Kenworth's engine roared to life as Marcus settled into the familiar seat. But this wasn't a regular delivery run. This was a war machine crafted by years of preparation, driven by a man who'd spent his life training for moments like this. All units, execute. Across the compound perimeter, multiple truck engines roared in response. The independent operators began their approach, looking like confused truckers caught in the wrong place, but their confusion was an act masking military precision. Carlos's rifle cracked twice more, eliminating cartel officers trying to restore order. Michelle's cyber assault intensified, turning the compound's own security systems against its defenders. And through it all, Marcus's truck rolled forward, gathering speed. Ramirez's voice cut through the chaos on an open channel. I see what you're doing, Commander, but ask yourself, how many of them will die before you reach me? How many families will pay the price for your vendetta? Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. His answer was coming at 60 miles per hour, wrapped in 40 tons of reinforced steel. The war for the highways had become a race against time, and Marcus Stone didn't intend to finish second. His reinforced Kenworth smashed through the compounds, out a gate at 60 miles per hour. Behind him, the other modified trucks hit different entry points with synchronized precision. The cartel's defensive lines shattered as their communications continued broadcasting contradictory orders. East Wing breach point identified, Michelle reported. But Marcus, they're moving the hostages. Ramirez knows what we're after. Through his tactical display, Marcus watched heat signatures being herded deeper into the compound. Behind them, more signatures showed Kazai's team preparing something in the lab wing. Chemical weapon protocols activated, Michelle warned. They're setting up for dispersal. Marcus guided his truck through the chaos, its reinforced hull deflecting small arms fire. The vehicle wasn't just transport anymore. It was a battering ram, a mobile command center, and when necessary, a weapon. Dave, status on the airstrip. Heavy resistance, his old teammate reported between bursts of gunfire. El Serpiente's personal guard is here. These aren't regular cartel soldiers, they're elite units. Torres. 3 aircraft grounded, but 3 more incoming. 10 minutes out. Marcus's truck smashed through another barrier, scattering cartel. Defenders. His modified bull bar caught one of their vehicles, sending it spinning. Through his enhanced windshield, he saw Ramirez directing operations from an elevated position, constantly adjusting to the changing situation. "Ghost to all units," Carlos called out. "Be advised they're deploying something new, some kind of aerosol dispensers on their vehicles." "Confirmation on chemical weapons," Michelle added. "They're going to contaminate the entire compound, make it impossible to reach the hostages without exposure." Marcus checked his truck's sealed life support system, another modification he'd hoped never to need. "How long until dispersal?" 5 minutes, maybe less. "Marcus, the concentration they're preparing, anyone exposed won't have long, including the hostages, including children. Time for the backup plan." "Michelle, remember that override you couldn't crack? The one protecting their chemical weapon failsafes?" "Yeah, it's isolated from the main network. Can't touch it." "You don't need to." Marcus pulled a small device from his tactical vest. Sarah wasn't just investigating the clinic before she died. She was gathering evidence. Found this in her personal effects after she was gone. "What is it?" "Access key to Kazai's original research database, the one Ramirez used to develop these weapons." A pause as Michelle processed this. She knew. She found out what they were doing. And they killed her for it. But not before she hid a back door into their system. Marcus's voice was cold. "Colonel's about to learn why you don't underestimate a dying woman's determination." He plugged the device into his truck's communications array. Immediately, new data flooded Michelle's systems. "My God," she breathed. "This is everything. Complete formulas, neutralizing agents. Marcus, I can trigger their fail-safe protocols, flood their storage areas with neutralizing compounds." "Do it!" Alarms blared across the compound as emergency systems activated. Through his tactical display, Marcus watched chaos erupt in the lab wing as automated safety protocols engaged. "Do you think this changes anything?" Ramirez's voice cut through their channel. "You think your wife's little insurance policy matters?" "I've already won, Commander. The hostages are being loaded onto transport helicopters as we speak. In 30 minutes, they'll be distributed across 3 states, carrying a weapon that makes my old compounds look primitive." Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. "Michelle!" confirmed. 2 helicopters spinning up on the roof. "But Marcus, Kazai's with the hostages. He's using them as shields." Tommy Rodriguez's voice broke in, thick with desperation. "Marcus, please. My family's on those choppers. All units converge on the main building," Marcus ordered. "Dave, get your team back here. Torres, delay those aircraft at all costs." "What's the play?" Dave asked. Marcus studied the building's schematic. 3 possible routes to the roof, all heavily defended. Traditional tactics wouldn't work, not with hostages in play. Time to think like a trucker. Michelle, building specs. Loading capacity of the top floor. A pause. Rated for helicopter operations. About 60 tons maximum. "Why?" Marcus allowed. Himself a grim smile. "Because my rig weighs 40. "You're insane," Dave said. "The structure won't hold." "Exactly." Marcus gunned his engine, heading for the building's service ramp. It was meant for small delivery trucks, not a fully loaded semi. But physics didn't care about intentions. "Carlos, I need those helicopter pilots." 2 shots rang out on his tactical display. Marcus watched the pilot signatures disappear from both aircraft. "You're clear," Carlos reported, "but they've got backup pilots incoming." Marcus's truck roared up the ramp, its reinforced suspension straining. Above, he knew Ramirez was watching, probably already figuring out his plan. "Commander Stone," the colonel's voice held a note of genuine respect, "you're going to kill everyone. Up here, including the hostages." "No, Colonel, I'm going to give you a choice." The truck smashed through another security door. Release them, or we all go down together. Gunfire peppered his truck as it climbed, but with the helicopters grounded and chemical weapons neutralized, Ramirez's options were running out. You won't do it, the colonel said, not with children at risk. Marcus's truck reached the final approach. Through his windshield, he could see the roof access, the hostages, Kazai's men trying to restart the helicopters. Sarah made me promise something else before she died, Marcus said quietly. She made me promise that if I ever found the people who killed her, I'd make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else's family. His engine roared one final time. Your choice, Colonel. But I always keep my promises. The truck's massive weight was already causing structural damage. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling below, visible through Marcus's thermal imaging. The building wasn't designed for this kind of stress. He's bluffing, Kazai's accented voice cut through the radio. Americans are too soft. They won't sacrifice children. Ghost to stone, Carlos reported. I count 15 hostages, 8 children. Kazai's using them as human shields. Angela Rodriguez and her kids are closest to the West helicopter. Through his reinforced windshield, Marcus could see them now. Families huddled together, surrounded by armed guards. Kazai himself stood near the children, his lab coat incongruous against his tactical gear. You know what your problem is, Commander. Ramirez called out. You're still thinking like a SEAL. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. No, Colonel, that's where you're wrong. Marcus revved his engine, inching the truck forward. More cracks appeared in the structure. I'm thinking like a father. The comment caught Ramirez off guard. You never had children. Sarah was pregnant when your weapons killed her. Marcus's voice was ice. 3 months. We hadn't told anyone. Yet, a long silence. Even the gunfire seemed to pause. Michelle, Marcus said quietly, activate Sarah's final protocol. Across the compound, new alarms blared. Emergency systems engaged, but not the ones Ramirez was expecting. Instead of containment, procedures. The building's fire suppression system was engaged. Specially modified by Sarah years ago, now spraying a neutralizing agent she'd developed while investigating the clinic. Impossible, Kazai breathed as the compound began detoxifying itself. The formula. Only I knew. My wife was smarter than you, Marcus said, and she made sure her work would finish even if she didn't. The neutralizing agent was everywhere now, rendering Kazai's weapons useless. The scientist's face contorted with rage. He grabbed Tommy's young son, pressing a pistol to the boy's head. Kill them all, he screamed, but his men hesitated. The compound's decontamination was proving Sarah's genius, exposing the horror of what they'd been part of. Some were already lowering their weapons. Stand down, Ramirez ordered, but for the first time, his men didn't obey. Marcus's truck crept forward another foot. Support beams groaned ominously. Last chance, Colonel. Sarah gave her life to stop you. I'm willing to do the same. Ramirez studied him for a long moment. You'll never prove any of this. I have too many connections, too much protection. Check. Your secure servers, Colonel, Michelle cut in. Sarah's program didn't just neutralize your weapons, it copied everything, sending it all to law enforcement agencies worldwide, right now. The colonel's face went pale as he checked his phone, seeing years of carefully hidden evidence exposing itself to the world. Papa! Tommy Rodriguez's son suddenly broke free, running toward the truck. Other children followed, recognizing safety when they saw it. Their guards, already shaken by the revelations about the weapons they'd been protecting, let them go. No! Kazai raised his pistol, but Carlos's rifle cracked once more. The scientist dropped, clutching his shoulder. Michelle, building status, Marcus asked as he helped children into his reinforced cab. 30 seconds until structural failure. East side's already going. Ramirez looked at his disintegrating operation, his deserting men, the evidence of his crimes spreading across the globe. For the first time, the colonel looked old. It was never about the trucking routes, was it? Marcus asked, securing the last child. It was about power, Ramirez admitted, the ability to reshape an entire region, to prove that strength is all that matters. That's where you're wrong again. Marcus nodded toward his cab full of rescued children. Love is all that matters. Sarah taught me that. The building groaned. Time was up. Ghost team, get those families clear, Marcus ordered. Dave, Torres, compound is neutralized. Sweep for stragglers. What about us? Ramirez asked quietly. Marcus looked at his old enemy. Colonel, I think it's time we both answered for our choices. The roof began to collapse as Marcus's truck's weight finally proved too much. But by then, the children were safe in his reinforced cab. The families were being evacuated by Carlos's team, and Sarah's final protocol was spreading truth across the digital world. As concrete crumbled and steel bent, Marcus Stone kept his hands steady on the wheel, just like he had through thousands of deliveries, just like he had through countless combat missions. Some loads were worth any price to deliver, and some promises had to be kept, no matter the cost. The war for the highways was ending, but its most important battle, the battle for justice, for family, for the future, had already been won. Unknown to everyone except Marcus, there was one final part of Sarah's protocol about to activate. One last surprise she'd left for the people who'd killed her, because Sarah Stone had been more than just a victim. She'd been a warrior too, and her last battle was about to begin. The compound's top floor collapsed in a controlled cascade, taking Marcus's truck, Ramirez, and 5 years of carefully buried secrets with it. But as emergency teams swarmed the site, something else was happening in the digital world. Marcus, Michelle's voice carried a note of awe. You need to see this. Across the country, computers were coming alive. Sarah's final protocol wasn't just exposing Ramirez's operation, it was revealing an entire network. Bank accounts, shell companies, political connections, all carefully documented during her final months. She knew she was dying, Marcus said, softly, watching the data flood across Michelle's screens. So she built a digital dead man's switch. The rescued families were being checked by medical teams. Tommy Rodriguez held his children close, tears streaming down his face. Around them, other reunions played out, moments of joy amid the chaos of the collapsed building. Marcus, Torres called out urgently. We've got movement at the airstrip. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Through the tactical displays, Marcus watched a convoy racing toward their position. But these weren't cartel vehicles. They were unmarked SUVs with very specific electronic signatures. CIA, Michelle confirmed. Sarah's protocol triggered something big. Really big, Dave's voice crackled through the comm. We've got FBI teams landing too, and, Marcus, you're not going to believe who's leading them. A new voice cut through their channel. Stone, you magnificent bastard. Marcus's breath caught. Director Hayes? In the flesh. Your wife's evidence just blew open the biggest national security conspiracy since Iran-Contra. Turns out Ramirez's operation went a lot higher than anyone suspected. Through the settling dust, Marcus watched more vehicles arrive. Not just federal agencies now, international task forces, intelligence services. Sarah's dead man's switch had cast a net far wider than anyone imagined. Sir, Marcus said carefully, about the compound. Already handled. Sarah's protocols included everything. Surveillance footage, witness statements, chemical weapons documentation. You and your team were conducting a sanctioned operation to prevent a major terrorist attack. The paperwork has already been filed. Marcus looked at the rescued families, now being moved to secure locations. The hostages will receive full witness protection, along with comprehensive medical care for any exposure. Hayes paused. Stone, Sarah was one of ours, deep cover analyst. She was investigating corruption in our chemical weapons monitoring division when she discovered Ramirez's connection. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His quiet, brilliant wife, the woman who'd loved gardening and mystery novels, had been fighting her own war all along. "She couldn't tell you," Hayes continued. "It would have compromised the operation, but she knew. She knew that if anything happened to her, you'd finish what she started." Around the compound, more evidence of Sarah's foresight emerged. The neutralizing agent she'd developed wasn't just destroying Kazai's weapons. It was preserving evidence, breaking down chemical structures into traceable components. "Director," Michelle cut in, "you need to see this. Sarah's protocol just unlocked another layer. It's a personal message. For Marcus." The tactical screens flickered, and suddenly Sarah's face appeared. She looked tired, worn by the cancer. That was killing her, but her eyes were bright with purpose. "Hello, my love," she said softly. "If you're seeing this, then everything worked. The evidence is out, the weapons are neutralized, and hopefully some families are back together." Marcus touched the screen gently, his throat tight. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything," Sarah continued, "about my work, about what I discovered. But I knew that when the time came you'd understand. You'd do what needed to be done," she smiled, that same warm smile that had first captured his heart years ago. "The baby." Her hand touched her stomach. "I wanted to tell you so many times. We were going to name her Hope. And in a way, that's what this is all about. Hope for the future. Hope that good people will stand up when it matters." Around Marcus, operations continued. Federal teams securing the site, medical personnel treating, the injured intelligence officers gathering evidence. But at this moment, there was only Sarah's voice. "I left you something else," she said. "Something besides the protocols and evidence. Michelle will find it. A trust fund set up for the families affected by these weapons. Use it well. Help them rebuild." Tears streamed down Marcus's face now, unashamed. "And Marcus, I know you'll want revenge. We'll want to hunt down everyone involved. But remember what I always told you. The greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's protecting those who can't protect themselves." The screen flickered as Sarah fought back her own tears. "I love you, my warrior trucker, my quiet hero. And I'm so proud of the man you've become." She touched the screen, as if reaching across time. "Now go. Live. Help others live. That's the best revenge of all." The message ended, leaving Marcus surrounded by the aftermath of a battle that had begun years ago, a battle his wife had started and he had finished. "Sir," Torres approached carefully, "we've got Senator Harrison in custody. His offshore accounts just lit up like Christmas thanks to Sarah's protocols. He was the one protecting Ramirez's operation." "Multiple arrests happening across 3 continents," Michelle added. "Sarah's evidence is solid. These people are going away for a long time." Marcus nodded, his tactical mind already processing the implications. But another part of him, the part that had loved a brilliant secret warrior named Sarah, was at peace for the first time in years. "What now?" Dave asked quietly. Marcus looked at the families being reunited, at the evidence being gathered, at the justice finally being served. Then he turned to his modified truck, battered but still running. "Now?" He smiled slightly. "Now we help these folks rebuild. Get them new trucks, new routes, new security systems. Sarah left us the means. Let's use it." "And the highways?" Carlos asked. "Still need protecting." Marcus checked his watch. "Speaking of which, I've got a VA hospital waiting on medical supplies. Little late, but better than never." One by one, his team nodded, understanding that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A chance to turn Sarah's final gift into something lasting. "Michelle," Marcus said as he climbed into his truck, "you still got those files on the other cartel operations? The ones Sarah identified?" "Complete with evidence trails and witness lists." "Why?" Marcus started his engine. Because my wife was right. The greatest victory is protecting others. And I'm thinking maybe it's time we put together a more permanent security solution for all the independent operators out there. Dave grinned. Now that sounds like a mission worth taking. As dawn broke over the desert, Marcus Stone guided his truck back onto the highway, but he wasn't just a trucker anymore, wasn't just an ex-SEAL. He was something new, a protector carrying on Sarah's legacy. The war for the highways was over, but the work of keeping them safe, of protecting the innocent, of standing up against those who would prey on the weak, that work was just beginning. And somewhere, Marcus knew, Sarah was smiling. 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in Pete's truck stop, watching the morning crowd. The place was different now, busier, more alive. Independent truckers were returning to their roots, no longer afraid of cartel interference. Maria brought him his usual coffee, her smile genuine now. "The new security systems are working great," she said. "Dad says business is up 30% since you installed them." Marcus nodded. Sarah's trust fund had provided more than just compensation for the affected families. It had given them the means to fight back, legally, systematically, effectively. Stone. Dave Cooper slid into the booth across from him, spreading out documents. First month's reports from the Highway Protection Initiative. The HPI, as they were calling it, had grown from Sarah's final gift into something bigger. A network of independent operators, former military personnel, and intelligence assets, all working together to keep the road safe. 27 attempted hijackings were prevented, Dave continued. 15 trafficking operations disrupted. And look at this, Michelle's monitoring system has identified 3 other cartels trying to move into the region. Not anymore, Carlos added, joining them. The former SEAL sniper had taken charge of the HPI's training program, teaching defensive driving and security protocols to independent operators. Marcus studied the reports. Sarah's protocols had done more than expose one operation. They had created a template for fighting back against organized crime across the entire transportation sector. "Torres called," Dave said quietly. "The FBI just finished interrogating Senator Harrison. He's naming names, lots of them. The corruption went deeper than anyone suspected." "And higher," Michelle's voice came through their secure earpieces. The NSA analyst had officially retired to run the HPI's cybersecurity division. "We're looking at cabinet-level involvement in some cases." Marcus watched a young trucker enter the diner, one of their new recruits, former Marine, now learning to balance commercial driving with security operations. The HPI was growing, attracting people who understood that sometimes the best way to serve was behind a wheel instead of a weapon. "Mr. Stone." Tommy Rodriguez approached their table, his family in tow. The young trucker looked different now, more confident, determined. "We've got 10 more independents ready to join the program." Marcus nodded. After the compound incident, Tommy had become one of their most effective recruiters. His story of loss, resistance, and redemption resonated with other operators who'd faced similar threats. "What about the chemical weapon victims?" Marcus asked quietly. "Sarah's research is saving lives," Michelle replied. "The treatment protocols she developed, the CDC is calling them revolutionary. Every exposed family is showing improvement." Director Hayes had kept his word. The affected families were receiving the best care available, their medical expenses covered by seized cartel assets. More importantly, they were being trained, equipped, and empowered to protect themselves. "There's something else," Dave said, sliding over a final document. "Remember that message Sarah left about hope?" Marcus's hands tightened on his coffee. "CUP, the trust fund. There's a separate account, specifically designated for children orphaned by cartel violence. She called it the Hope Foundation. Even now, Sarah was saving lives, protecting families, building a future. Marcus's satellite phone buzzed, a priority alert from their monitoring system. "What is it?" "Possible situation in Texas," Michelle reported. 3 suspicious convoys moving toward Houston. Pattern matches another cartel's. Operating procedure. Marcus was already standing, Dave and Carlos moving with practiced coordination. This was their life now. Part truckers, part protectors, all warriors for a better tomorrow. "Tommy, get our response teams moving. Maria, activate the alert network. Michelle, I need routes and intercept points." As he headed for his truck, Marcus touched the small photo he kept on his dashboard. Sarah, smiling in their garden, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. She'd known even then that the fight wouldn't end with Ramirez's operation, but she'd also known that good people working together could make a difference. "Hope," he whispered, starting his engine. "That's what it's all about." His CB radio crackled with coordinated responses as other HPI operators acknowledged the alert. Former soldiers, career truckers, intelligence analysts, all working together to keep the highways safe, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The war for the highways had evolved into something larger, a mission, a calling, a legacy. Marcus Stone, former SEAL, veteran trucker and keeper of Sarah's final protocols, knew exactly where he belonged. On the front lines, behind the wheel, carrying hope down endless highways toward a better tomorrow. The morning sun painted the desert gold as his truck rolled out, followed by a convoy of dedicated protectors, Sarah's warriors, keeping her dream alive 1 mile at a time. The battle was over, but the mission continued. And somewhere Marcus knew, Sarah was still smiling. The Highway Protection Initiative's command center, housed in a renovated warehouse outside Socorro, hummed with activity. Dozens of monitors tracked commercial traffic across 5 states, identifying patterns and potential threats. This was Sarah's legacy in action. Not just taking down one cartel, but creating a system to prevent others from rising. Latest recruitment numbers, Dave reported, bringing up new statistics. 57 independent operators completed advanced training this month, 34 former military personnel integrated into regular routes. Michelle's background checks confirm they're all clean. Marcus studied the deployment map. Each green dot represented a trained HPI operator, truckers who could handle both a rig and a crisis. The coverage was growing, creating overlapping zones of protection along major routes. "What about the technology rollout?" he asked. Michelle's voice came through their secure channel. "Sarah's designs are revolutionary. Each truck system is self-contained but networked. They can't hack what they can't find." The modified trucks were masterpieces of engineering, reinforced frames, bulletproof glass, and electronic countermeasures. All disguised as regular commercial vehicles. Sarah had thought of everything, right down to the specialized paint that deflected infrared detection. "We've got movement on the cartel response," Torres added, joining them via secure video. The DEA agent had become their official liaison, helping coordinate with law enforcement. They're adapting, trying new tactics. But here's the interesting part. Some of their own people are reaching out. Defectors? Better. Mid-level operators who've seen what happened to Ramirez. They want protection to turn evidence. Torres smiled grimly. Sarah's protocols didn't just expose one operation. They created a blueprint for dismantling these organizations. From within. An alert flashed on the main screen. Michelle's voice sharpened. "Multiple hits on our tracking system. 3 suspicious convoys converging on Houston. Pattern matches the Gulf Cartel's signature." Marcus moved to the tactical station, where Carlos was already pulling up satellite imagery. "What's the target?" "Medical T. Supply convoy," Michelle replied. "VA hospital shipment just like the one you were carrying that night." The parallel wasn't lost on anyone, but this time they were ready. "Tommy, You have units in the area? 4 HPI trucks are already moving to intercept, the young operator reported. 2 more staging at fallback points. Local law enforcement is briefed and standing by. Marcus watched the tactical display as green dots converged on the potential threat. Each HPI truck carried a trained team, coordinating through encrypted channels that Sarah's protocols kept secure. They're not just hitting random targets anymore, Dave noted. This is targeted. They're testing our response capabilities. Let them test, Carlos said quietly. Each attempt teaches us more about their methods, helps us protect more people. Marcus thought about the families they'd saved from the compound, about the truckers who'd found a new purpose as protectors, about Sarah, who'd seen this need years ago and planned for it even as she was dying. Director Hayes is on the line, Michelle announced. Says it's urgent. The CIA director's face appeared on their main screen. Stone, we've got confirmation. Gulf Cartel isn't working alone on this one. They've got backing from someone higher up. Way higher up. How high? Remember those names Senator Harrison gave up? One of them just authorized a private security initiative along the Texas border. They're trying to recreate Ramirez's operation, but with official sanction this time. Marcus shared a look with his team. This was why Sarah had created the HPI, not just to fight street-level criminals, but to protect against corruption at every level. Send us everything you've got, he said. Michelle, activate Sarah's secondary protocols, the ones specifically designed for political corruption. Already on it. You should see what she left us. Recordings, money trails, encrypted communications. She built a case against everyone involved, just waiting for the right moment. Mr. Stone? Maria's voice came through their channel. She'd become their eyes and ears at the truck stop, coordinating with a network of diner staff across 3 states. We're getting reports. Other cartels are moving too, trying to take advantage of the chaos. Let them come, Marcus said quietly. Sarah left us everything we need. The tools, the evidence, the networks. Now it's up to us to use them. He moved to the center of the command room, addressing his gathered team. Former soldiers, career truckers, intelligence analysts, all united by a common purpose. This was never just about one cartel, he said. Sarah knew that. She saw the bigger picture, a systematic attempt to control our highways, our supply lines, our future. That's why she built all this, not just to take down Ramirez, but to give good people the tools to fight back. He gestured to the map, where more HPI units were moving into position around Houston. Every truck out there is carrying more than cargo. They're carrying hope, carrying proof that ordinary people can stand up to corruption and win. Contact in 10 minutes, Michelle reported. Gulf Cartel units accelerating. Marcus headed for his own truck, Dave and Carlos falling in beside him. This wasn't just another mission. This was Sarah's vision becoming reality. A network of protectors, keeping the highways safe for everyone. You know what Sarah would say right now? Dave asked as they climbed into their rigs. Marcus smiled, touching the photo on his dashboard. She'd say the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemies. It's in protecting those who can't protect themselves. His team finished in unison. The HPI convoy rolled out into the morning sun, each truck carrying Sarah's legacy forward. The war for the highways had evolved, but its essential truth remained the same. Sometimes the quietest heroes made the biggest difference. 1 mile, 1 truck, 1 saved life at a time. The Houston operation was about to become the Highway Protection Initiative's first major test. 3 Gulf Cartel convoys converging on a medical supply route, a deliberate challenge to everything they'd built. All units, sound off, Marcus called through the encrypted channel as his truck led the HPI response team. Ghost team in position. Carlos's voice was steady. His modified tanker truck provided perfect cover for his sniper team. Tech support active. Michelle had deployed her mobile command center, a seemingly ordinary maintenance vehicle packed with Sarah's most advanced surveillance equipment, cavalry ready. Dave Cooper's team of 4 modified rigs was spread along the likely intercept points. Marcus watched his tactical display as Tommy Rodriguez's voice joined in. Local assets in place, police units standing by, but kept in the dark about details. The medical convoy they were protecting carried crucial supplies for 3 VA hospitals, but more importantly, it carried hope, proof that independent operators could still run vital routes without submitting to cartel control. Contact in 5, Michelle reported. First cartel convoy matches the previous pattern, 3 SUVs, 2 tactical trucks. Heavy weapons confirmed. Marcus guided his rig into position. The highway stretched before him, eerily empty thanks to Michelle's traffic control algorithms. Sarah's final gift wasn't just about fighting back, it was about fighting smart. Second, the convoy approaching from the south, Carlos called. These guys are different, military precision in their movement. Ex-special forces, probably the ones backing the Gulf Cartel's expansion. Third group holding back, Dave added, likely their command element. Marcus keyed his radio. Remember, this isn't just about stopping one attack. We're sending a message. Show them what happens when they threaten our roads. The first cartel convoy appeared ahead, their black SUVs moving to surround the medical transport. Standard intimidation tactics, but they weren't expecting what was waiting. Michelle, initiate Sarah's shield. Across the highway, hidden transmitters activated. The cartel's electronic systems, communications, engine management, even their weapons targeting assists began failing systematically. What the hell? A panicked voice cut through their channel as the cartel vehicles started losing power. Sarah's final protocols weren't just defensive, they could selectively disable any vehicle's electronic systems within range. Now, Marcus ordered. The HPI convoy emerged from hidden positions. Carlos's team disabled the lead vehicles with precise shots to engine blocks. Dave's trucks moved to cut off escape routes, and Marcus's rig, specially modified for exactly this scenario, deployed its secret weapon. Reinforced barriers extended from his trailer's sides, creating an impromptu corral. The cartel vehicles, already struggling with disabled systems, were suddenly trapped. Second convoy responding, Michelle reported. But they've got problems of their own. The ex-military group tried to maintain formation as they rushed to assist their companions. But Sarah's systems were ready for them too. Their tactical communications went dark. Their GPS showed false positions. Even their night vision equipment failed, leaving them effectively blind in the pre-dawn darkness. Message from their command vehicle, Michelle said. They're ordering a full retreat. Marcus watched the tactical display as the third convoy turned away, their carefully planned operation falling apart. But this wasn't just about stopping one attack. Send the package, he ordered. Michelle activated another of Sarah's protocols. Every cartel commander's phone, every corrupt official's computer, every compromised law enforcement channel received the same message. The highways are protected now. Every route, every truck, every driver. Try to take them by force and you'll face the consequences. This is your only warning. The message came with proof, detailed files on the Gulf Cartel's operation, including their political connections. Sarah's evidence, carefully gathered and preserved, now deployed as a weapon of its own. Multiple vehicles approaching, Carlos reported. But not a cartel. FBI, DEA, even Texas Rangers. Director Hayes's voice cut through their channel. Well done, Stone. The evidence package just triggered investigations in 3 states. The Gulf Cartel's political protection is crumbling. Marcus watched as law enforcement surrounded the disabled cartel vehicles. The HPI trucks were already disappearing, returning to their regular routes. Just ordinary truckers again, invisible but vigilant. Sir, Marcus said, about those private security initiatives they were planning, already handled. Sarah's protocols included specific contingencies for political corruption. The same officials who approved the cartel's operation are now facing federal indictments. Tommy's voice broke in. Marcus, we're getting reports. Others, cartels are pulling back from their planned operations. Words spreading about what happened here. Good. Marcus checked his delivery schedule. The medical supplies were still on track for the VA hospitals. Let them spread the word. Let them know that the highways aren't their playground anymore. Ghost to all units, Carlos called. Be advised we've got audiences. Lots of phones recording, truckers watching. The story's going viral, Marcus smiled. Sarah would have appreciated that. The best victories weren't just about force. They were about changing perceptions, showing people they didn't have to live in fear. All units, return to your roots, he ordered. Regular deliveries, regular schedules, but stay alert. This is just the beginning. The HPI convoy dispersed, each truck returning to its commercial cover. But they were different now. Protectors instead of just transporters. Guardians instead of just drivers. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Maria at the truck stop. You should see the chatter on the trucker networks. Everyone's talking about the highway guardians, about how the roads are changing. Tell them to stay strong, Marcus replied. Help is always closer than they think. He guided his truck back onto his regular route, just another aging driver making his deliveries. But the photo on his dashboard caught the rising sun, making... Sarah's smile seemed to glow. You were right, he told her quietly. The greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemies. It's showing others how to protect themselves. The war for the highways had evolved into something bigger than one man, one team, or even one organization. It had become a movement, a promise, hope, delivered 1 mile at a time. The aftermath of the Houston operation rippled through the trucking community like a shockwave. At truck stops across the country, drivers shared shaky cell phone footage of the Gulf Cartel's defeat. The images were unclear, just glimpses of modified trucks and disabled cartel vehicles, but their impact was unmistakable. Reports coming in from across the border, Michelle announced through their secure channel. Gulf Cartel leadership is in chaos. 3 top commanders resigned this morning. They're calling it the Houston humiliation. Marcus guided his truck into Pete's lot, where a crowd of independent operators had gathered. The atmosphere was different now. Excited, hopeful, determined. 6 more applications for HPI training, Dave reported, joining Marcus at their usual booth. These aren't just regular truckers, former Rangers, Force Recon, even a couple of ex-CIA operatives, words spreading in the right circles. Maria brought their coffee, her tablet displaying more surveillance feeds. The truck stop had become one of their primary intelligence hubs, with Sarah's systems integrated seamlessly into its regular operations. Cartel's trying to spin it, she said, showing them intercepted communications, claiming it was a rogue operation, not sanctioned by leadership. But nobody's buying it. Because of this, Michelle cut in. Their screens lit up with financial data, evidence of the Gulf Cartel's political connections, now spreading across law enforcement networks. Sarah's protocols didn't just expose their tactical operations, they revealed the entire command structure. Tommy. Rodriguez entered, followed by 3 new recruits, independent operators, ready to join the fight. It's not just about defense anymore, he said. Drivers are organizing, creating their own security networks based on the HPI model. Marcus studied the tactical displays. Across the region, patterns were shifting. Cartel convoys were avoiding major routes, sticking to back roads. Their once bold operations had become cautious, hesitant. Director Hayes is on the line, Michelle announced. The CIA director's face appeared on their secure screens. Stone, we've got movement at the highest levels. Those political connections Sarah exposed, they're singing like canaries. 3 senators, 2 governors, even a federal judge, all facing indictment. The private security initiative, dead in the water. No corporation will touch it now. But here's the interesting part. Legitimate security firms are reaching out. They want to adopt the HPI model for their own operations. Marcus shared a look with his team. Sarah's vision had been bigger than just protecting trucks. She'd created a template for fighting back against organized crime at every level. There's more, Hayes continued. Remember those families from Ramirez's compound? The ones exposed to Kazai's weapons, the treatment protocols Sarah developed. The CDC just confirmed complete recovery for all patients. The news hit Marcus hard. Even now, months after her death, Sarah was still saving lives. "Sir," he said carefully, "about the HPI's unofficial status. Already handled. New classification just came through. Private security contractor with special federal authorization. Your teams can operate freely now, with full legal protection." Dave whistled softly. Sarah thought of everything. Not everything, Marcus corrected. She thought of everyone. Every driver who just wants to do their job. Every family is waiting for their loved ones to come home. Every community that depends on safe, reliable transportation. Through the truck stop windows, he watched more rigs arrive. Regular trucks carrying regular cargo. But now they moved with confidence, knowing they weren't alone. "Michelle," he called, "what's the status of those other cartel operations, the ones planning to move into Ramirez's territory?" "Already adapting our response." Sarah's systems identified 3 major groups trying to fill the power vacuum. But watch this. Their tactical displays showed a new pattern emerging. Independent operators coordinating their routes, truck stops sharing intelligence, communities working together to protect their supply lines. "It's not just about us anymore," Carlos observed. "The whole industry is changing." Marcus nodded. The Gulf Cartel's defeat wasn't just a tactical victory, it was a symbol, proof that organized crime could be fought and beaten by organized resistance. "New protocol coming online," Michelle announced. Sarah called it Phase 2. "It's..." "Marcus, you need to see this. The screens are filled with fresh data, not just defensive measures now, but a comprehensive strategy for securing America's highways. Training programs, security networks, community outreach, all designed to turn independent operators into an interconnected force for good." She didn't just give us the tools to fight back, Marcus realized. She gave us the blueprint for lasting change. His satellite phone buzzed with an alert. Another cartel convoy spotted, this time near the Canadian border. But they weren't facing isolated truckers anymore. They were facing a community united by purpose, equipped by Sarah's genius, and driven by hope. "All units," Marcus called, heading for his truck. "Let's show them what that change looks like." The HPI convoy rolled out into the afternoon sun, each vehicle carrying more than just cargo. They carried Sarah's legacy, a promise that the highways would remain free, that good people working together could overcome any threat. The war for the highways had become a revolution, and it was just beginning. 1 year later, the morning sun painted Pete's truck stop in familiar shades of gold as Marcus Stone watched the next generation of highway guardians prepare for their first mission. 20 trucks, each modified with Sarah's latest systems, crewed by a mix of veterans and experienced drivers. "Final checks complete," Michelle reported from the command center. The former NSA analyst had transformed the truck stop's basement into a state-of-the-art operations hub, coordinating HPI activities across North America. "They're ready," Dave Cooper said, joining Marcus at their usual booth, "better trained than we were at the start." The past year had seen the Highway Protection Initiative grow from a desperate defensive measure into something unprecedented, a nationwide network of professional transporters dedicated to keeping America's roads safe. Latest intel from Director Hayes, Michelle announced through their secure channel. Cartel activity on major highways is down 80%. Their political protections gone, their corruption networks exposed. They're falling back to traditional smuggling routes. Marcus studied the tactical displays showing traffic patterns across the country. Green dots represented HPI operators, now numbering in the hundreds. Each one carried Sarah's legacy forward. "You see that?" Tommy Rodriguez pointed to a cluster of signals near the border. His family had become integral to the operation, with Angela running their recruitment program and their children attending the first HPI youth training course. "Cartel probe," Carlos confirmed from his overwatch position. "Testing our response. On times. Standard pattern now. They send in a small team, watch our reaction, retreat before engagement." Marcus smiled slightly. The cartels had learned their lesson after Houston. 3 more major operations had tried to challenge the HPI's control of the highways. 3 more had failed spectacularly, their defeats documented and shared across trucking networks. "Mr. Stone," a young voice drew his attention. Lisa Chen, Michelle's niece, stood nervously by their table. At 17, she represented the future, children of truckers and veterans training to carry on the mission. "Time for the ceremony?" Marcus asked. Lisa nodded. Outside, the 20 new HPI trucks had formed a circle around a simple granite memorial. Sarah's memorial, though only a select few knew her true role in creating all this. Marcus took his place before the gathered operators. Veterans and civilians, young and old, united by a common purpose. Behind them, regular truck stop activities continued, a reminder of the normal life they all fought to protect. "1 year ago," Marcus began, his voice carrying across the quiet crowd, "we faced a choice. Watch our highways fall to corruption and violence, or stand up and fight back. But we weren't alone in that fight." He touched the memorial gently. Sarah. Stone saw this coming, saw the threats gathering, the storm approaching. She could have run, could have hidden. Instead, she spent her final days building us the tools we'd need. The morning sun caught the memorial's inscription. "Hope is the greatest cargo we carry. Look around you," Marcus continued. "Every truck here carries her legacy. Every operator continues her work. But it's not just about fighting anymore. It's about building something that lasts." Director Hayes stepped forward, his presence a testament to how far they'd come. "The Highway Protection Initiative is more than a security force now. It's a model for community defense, for citizens standing up against organized crime. Congress just approved nationwide expansion of the program." Marcus nodded. Sarah's protocols had evolved into standardized training programs. Her defensive systems were being adapted for civilian use. Her medical breakthroughs had saved hundreds of lives. "But remember," Marcus told the new operators, "our greatest victory isn't in defeating our enemies. It's in protecting those who can't protect themselves. Every load delivered safely, every family reunited, every community made safer. That's how we honor her memory." The ceremony concluded with a traditional truck horn salute, 20 rigs sounding off in sequence, a sound of defiance, of unity, of hope. "First assignments are out," Michelle announced through their comms. "We've got 3 priority convoys, moving medical supplies, 2 refugee transport operations, and a special situation near Toronto." Marcus watched the new operators move to their vehicles with purpose. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a calling. "What about you?" Dave asked, quietly. "Taking that retirement Hayes offered?" Marcus smiled, heading for his own truck. The same modified Kenworth that had started it all, now bearing the HPI's official insignia, a shield crossed by highway lines. "Sarah knew I'd never retire," he said, climbing into the familiar cab. "Not as long as there are people who need protection, roads that need guarding." The photo on his dashboard caught the morning light, Sarah in their garden, smiling that knowing smile. She'd seen the future coming, seen the battles ahead, but more importantly, she'd seen hope. "All units," Marcus called, starting his engine. "Time to roll. We've got hope to deliver." The HPI convoy moved out in perfect formation, each truck carrying more than just cargo. They carried Sarah's legacy, America's lifelines, and the promise of safer highways for everyone. The war was over. The cartels were broken, their political allies exposed, their operations in chaos. But the mission continued, because as long as there were highways to protect, communities to serve, and hope to deliver, Marcus Stone and the Highway Protection Initiative would be there. In truck stops across the country, drivers shared stories of the highway guardians, of mysterious trucks appearing just when needed, of criminal operations thwarted by unseen protectors, of a network that turned independent operators into an unbreakable chain. But few knew the truth. Few knew about Sarah Stone, the dying analyst, who'd built an arsenal of hope, about Marcus Stone, the ex-SEAL trucker who'd turned her vision into reality, about the quiet heroes who proved that ordinary people working together could change the world. The morning sun rose higher as Marcus's truck rolled down the highway, leading a new generation of protectors into action. In his mirror, he watched the memorial grow smaller, a simple stone marker that represented so much more. "You were right, Sarah," he said softly. "Hope really is the greatest cargo we carry." And somewhere he knew she was smiling, because the highways were safe again. The communities were protected. And most importantly, her final gift, the gift of hope, was being delivered every day 1 mile at a time by a growing army of guardians who'd learned that the greatest heroes often looked just like ordinary truckers. The command center beneath. Pete's truck stop had become something Sarah could never have imagined. Beyond the tactical displays and communication systems, an entire wall was dedicated to success stories. Photos of reunited families, newspaper clippings about thwarted hijackings, letters from grateful communities. "Final numbers for the quarter," Michelle announced, bringing up fresh statistics. 312 attempted criminal operations were prevented. 87 trafficking rings disrupted. Over 2,000 independent operators are now trained in basic security protocols. But the numbers didn't tell the whole story. Marcus watched the truck stop's regular activities through the security feeds. Families dining together without fear, drivers planning routes with confidence, communities reconnecting as supply lines remained secure. "We've got something interesting," Torres called from her DEA liaison station. "Remember those cartel accounts Sarah's protocols exposed? The seized assets have been converted into a foundation. The Hope Foundation is now the largest private supporter of anti-trafficking programs in North America." Marcus nodded. Even now, Sarah's influence continued to grow. Her medical protocols had evolved into standard treatments for chemical weapons exposure. Her security systems were being adapted for civilian infrastructure protection. Her vision of protected highways had become a model for community defense worldwide. "Mr. Stone," Lisa Chen approached again, this time with purpose. "The new training program you asked for, connecting trucking schools with veteran mentors. We've got 50 schools signed up already. The next generation, not just learning to drive trucks, but learning to protect communities, to carry hope forward." "Show him the other thing," Michelle urged her niece. Lisa pulled up a new display. "We analyzed Sarah's original protocols. There were patterns we missed, connections to other criminal enterprises beyond the cartels. She wasn't just building a defense for highways, she was creating a template for fighting organized crime everywhere." Marcus studied the data. Everything connected: transportation security, community defense, political accountability. Sarah hadn't just given them tools for one battle. She'd given them weapons for a generational war against corruption. "Director Hayes is asking about expansion," Dave reported. "Canada wants an HPI presence. European transport unions are requesting training." Even the UN's interested in adapting our methods for humanitarian corridors. The memorial stone caught the last rays of sunset, its simple inscription carrying weight beyond words. Hope is the greatest cargo we carry. Tell them yes, Marcus said, but we do it Sarah's way. Not just security, but community. Not just defense, but development. We protect the highways by protecting the people who depend on them. An alert flashed across their screens. Priority movement detected near the border. But instead of tension, the room remained calm, professional. They weren't just reacting anymore, they were leading, shaping the future of transportation security. All units, Marcus called, one last time before heading to his truck. Remember why we're here. Remember what Sarah saw. Not just the threats, but the potential. Every truck is a lifeline. Every driver is a guardian. Every mile is a chance to deliver hope. The new HPI convoy rolled into the gathering darkness, their trucks indistinguishable from regular commerce. But they carried something more precious than cargo. They carried Sarah's legacy, a promise that ordinary people, working together, could overcome any threat. The war for the highways had become something larger, a movement, a mission, a transformation of an entire industry from targets into guardians. And somewhere Marcus knew Sarah was smiling, because she'd seen it all coming, seen the battles, the victories, the changes, seen ordinary truckers become extraordinary heroes, seen hope triumph over fear, the end of one story, the beginning of countless others, and a legacy that would roll on as long as there were highways to protect, communities to serve, and hope to deliver. For Marcus Stone, former SEAL, veteran trucker, and keeper of Sarah's final protocols, the greatest victory wasn't in the battles they'd won. It was in the future they'd secured. A future where the highways remained free, the communities remained connected, and hope remained the most precious cargo of all. The morning sun painted the desert gold as his truck rolled down familiar roads. But they weren't just roads anymore. They were lifelines, protected by a new generation of guardians who understood that the greatest heroes often looked just like ordinary truckers. And in truck stops across the country, drivers shared stories of the highway guardians, of mysterious protectors appearing when needed most, of communities standing together against corruption, of hope delivered 1 mile at a time. The war was over, but the mission continued, because as long as there were highways to protect and hope to deliver, Marcus Stone and the Highway Protection Initiative would be there, carrying Sarah's legacy forward. 1 mile, 1 truck, 1 protected community at a time, forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,